Hey, we are back and today we will talk about costs and the 10 things you should consider in your cost estimate before making an offer on a boat. So even before I start, let me share a story with you. I was working for a company that allowed me to implement projects in different places. And I remember that during a small talk with an executive, I mentioned an article about the amount of savings a person should achieve to retire. Something similar, I think the Bank of Montreal just published a month ago here in Canada. So I was in the middle of my 20s, and I thought, oh, I would never be able to reach that goal. And then he asked me why. I told him that with the salary I was making as a consultant, it would be improbable. He asked me again, why? You know, I have to pay bills and yada, yada, yada. And then he stared at me, asked me again, and why? He was applying to me the same technique I was trained to apply on my projects, which is the 5 whys. So that was a stimulus to understand where my money was going to. So I started to register everything I was spending, like food, clothes, car, everything else in a spreadsheet for a couple of months. That helped me to understand where I was. And my point here is, when you understand where you are, it makes it easier to plan where we are going to be in the future. Without further ado, let's get back to the topic of today. How do you prepare your cost estimate to buy your boat? First, let's start with the obvious one, shall we? Boat price tag. You know, that's the purchase price of the boat and is the starting point for your budget. Don't get me wrong, this can be very emotional. I mean, especially if you are falling in love with a boat or a particular model or things like that. Second thing, tax and registration. I don't know where you live, but depending on the place, it can be 10, 15% or even more. And depending on the size of your boat, you may need to pay some registration fees. That can be a couple of hundreds of dollars. Let's be real, you're buying a boat, so who cares about little things like taxes? Uh-oh, stinky. Third thing, survey. That's where the boat gets the physical exam and blood work, so to speak. Think about something. If you're buying a house, that's an expensive item. Usually you hire a house inspector to check the house and help you with the information before putting in an offer, correct? And how about an old car? It's usually nice to have a mechanic to have a look in the car before putting in an offer. The surveyor will help you to understand issues and potential repairs you might need on the boat before putting in an offer. Number 4, repairs and maintenance. Here you have 2 pieces. One is one shot, one is the annual fees or recruiting fees, usually thumbs in the air. Boat owners tell you that they spend something between 10 and 15% of the cost of the boat, or the price tag of the boat, every year on maintenance. My experience is usually for the first year, you should forecast for something between 20% or more. We can talk about that later. But usually, if you're just buying a boat and there's some things that usually have to be repaired before you go into regular maintenance, or 10% by year. Number 5, insurance. Again, you just bought something, you want that one to be protected, right? And another topic here is to be aware that that's a mandatory thing in most marinas and yacht clubs, at least if you plan to keep the boat there or just to go and visit some of those places. Number 6, and here's the question. I don't know if that should be number 2, number 1. Anyways, it is about the place to keep the boat. Again, here we have one shot and the recurrent one. To be honest with you, I think something should be talked about in a different episode, places to keep the boat and what marinas and yacht clubs offer. But the point is, most people forget that this is one of the big costs of boat ownership. Usually it's what they call boat storage. So be aware of that, okay? And of course, unless you are planning to live in a boat full time or things like that, or trail your boat to your front yard and keep it there for a while, which I mean is not such a bad idea. I mean, no more mowing the lawn. Anyways, you have to think about boat dockage and storage, and that experience will vary depending on where you're located and the size of your boat. So, number 7, transportation. Yeah, if the boat you are just searching for is not located near you, you may think about transportation. You have to pay somebody else to bring it to you, or you have to take the boat to a location that you want to keep it, which means that this can be a very significant cost. So it's important to keep a budget for that as well. Number 8, operational costs. Yeah, again, one-shot recurring fee later. This is to cover things like safety equipment, like life jackets, first aid kits, things that you need to keep in the boat for your own security. Depending on the size of the boat, you have different requirements. Think about that and check it beforehand. And the recurrent fees. So not so much for a sailboat, but you have to think about fuel, other fees you have to pay as well, regularly, to keep your boat on the water. Number 9, contingency fund. Okay, that's not exactly mandatory, but is recommended. It's only to help you to cover unexpected costs or emergency costs, things like that, but it might also help you think about your next boat. So, if you have to upgrade your boat in the future and you have these contingencies funds already settled, it may give you that regular room to think about your next boat without the headaches of going through loans and things like that. So it's the funding that gives you peace of mind and helps you ensure that you are prepared for any unexpected expenses. And finally, number 10, I don't think that's exactly a task for costs, but maybe some tips that can help to save some costs. Okay, first of all, don't spend too much money on your first boat. I know it's crazy to tell you that one now, but you're just starting. You don't know if that's something that you really love it, although I can tell you probably will. But it's like your first car. You don't like to spend all that money on a very fancy car if you don't know yet how to drive or whether you want to keep that car later. Second thing, don't go too crazy again. But this time on repairs and improvements, at least in the first 2 years. My point is to be just happy enjoying the boat and try to reschedule those tasks and upgrades in the long run. My point is trying to focus on the things that need to be repaired to just keep the boat safe. Another point is to be careful with improvements. It can make the boat more comfortable and functional, but they're usually not recouped quickly. Or if you pay $5,000 in a boat, that will probably be worth the same $5,000 when you sell the boat, even though you put $5,000 more in improvements. So be aware of that. Another thing to consider is if you're thinking to stretch a budget to just jump to a bigger size boat, or to just, instead of go to the small one you can handle now, jump already to a bigger one. Remember that the costs of maintenance, even for slightly larger boats, sometimes they are disproportionately higher, which means that bigger boats means more electronics, more maintenance, more things and moving pieces. Be aware of that, okay, before moving to a bigger boat now. Let me tell another story just to clarify these 10 end tips here. The first thing I changed when I bought my boat was the VHF radio. It's something that always helps with the safety on the water, so I thought maybe a new VHF radio would be a good idea. I was working on the wiring and I think I could change the navigation lights to LED as well. Not that old bulbs are not working, but come on, I'm just working here, it's going to be nice. It'll pull less current for the battery, so I start to justify why I was doing that. So, I did it. Then I thought, oh, standing rigging. Yes. The surveyor told me that I should be replacing those in the next 2 or 3 years. Why not do this now? Let's replace the standing rigging. It's a safety thing, right? And how about the lifelines? Let's replace lifelines as well. Again, how suddenly a silly swap on a VHF radio pulled me down in the rabbit hole to spend more and more on improvements. Just sharing, okay? If we think about all these tips, it might help you to uncover one of the big misconceptions about sailboat costs. It's easy to experience that boat ownership is very more and much more expensive than it should be in the first 1 or 2 years. And the reason for that is because the expectations are not set correctly before even making an offer in a boat. Sometimes things that look very priority in the first year might not be the same after using the boat for a while. So, my point is, use it a little bit and check if those improvements are really required now. Another thing is regular maintenance is very key to understand what's coming to your way. So, if you do the maintenance correctly and have it scheduled, you should not be caught by surprise in a big fee with no money to pay for that. So, in summary, while boating can be expensive, it doesn't have to be. There are many ways to make boating more affordable and enjoyable. You can share ownership with a boat, with your friends or family members. You can start with a smaller boat and progress to a bigger one. And you can also go with a trailered boat, which means that you can spare some of the costs to keep the boat in a marina or storage. A quick recap of what we discussed today. First of all, boat price tag. Second, tax and registration. Third, survey, get one. 4, repairs and maintenance. 5, insurance. 6, the place to keep your boat. 7, transportation. 8, operational costs. 9, contingency funding. And finally, 10th, some tips to help you with the final budget. I hope this information was helpful to you. See you on the water and have fun. We got you covered.